Well, good morning, everyone. Am I on? Okay, we're good. Well, thank you, Rosie, and thanks the bookstore. This is what they're doing here with this conscious community, I think, is awesome stuff. And with the psychic fairs with Christy and Rosie and Jacob and Simran, they do just incredible stuff, what's going here. And the psychic fairs have been such a huge success. And these conscious community, and when they asked me to talk, I was like, well, what more appropriate at the Edgar Cayce, at the A.R.E. and Foundation and the psychic fairs to talk about in a conscious community that, yes, we are psychic, every single one of us. It's just not the readers who do it professionally, but we all have it, and we all have it in us. And it really is it's a journey, and it's a birthright. And we're very fortunate with Edgar Cayce, a psychic that this organization is based on. They asked him, how do you do this? And can anybody else do this? And he gave us incredible, great information about it, and that's what we're going to talk about today, that we all can do this. And it's really why we're here. And I love it when you're asking psychic, especially someone like Edgar Cayce, they would put, he would go into a self-induced hypnotic trance, and they would ask him questions, and he'd give the answers. And they asked him, can anyone else do this work besides Edgar Cayce? Of course, I love it, when someone's in that higher consciousness state, because that's really what we're talking about here, says, we have no work before us. Didn't see it as work. It's like, oh, you got to learn how to ask the right questions if you want the right answers. It's like, okay, the psychic phenomenon or the readings, all can do it. This is from Edgar himself. All can already do it. Well, how can we develop it? All can already do it. And one of the key points was with the subjugation of one of the elements of the trinity of the individual. With subjugation of one of the elements of the trinity of the individual. Basically, what he's talking about here is that trinity is mind, body, and spirit. And the subjugation is subjugating the body. Getting the body out of the way, getting the monkey mind out of the way. If any of you have ever dealt with it when, say, in a meditation or something, our five senses, our bodies can distract us more than anything else, distract us from that spirit and mind. So getting into that quiet place and allow that higher consciousness to come forward. Very straightforward about it, on how it is accomplished. And we all know this. We all know we have this ability. And we've all experienced it. I guarantee, I know everyone here has experienced it, and if they'll admit to it, because we've all experienced it, because we use the terms all the time, but we have this kind of approach avoidance condition with psychic ability or psychic phenomenon. For what do? For women, we call, it's women's intuition. How did she know? Oh, I don't know. It's that women's intuition. It catches me every time. She just knows. We're talking about that, but of course, guys can't have women intuition. No. No. But we have gut instinct. How did he know? I just knew it in my gut. We're talking about the phenomenon. But we kind of hold it at arm's length, even though we know we've experienced it. We use it in decision making. I would say the perfect example is one of the most popular shows on television nowadays, and it's been on like 10 years, and actually it's spun off 2 other series from it, is at its basis exactly about this. And it's a kind of a detective show, so with all its science and all its labs and all that, detective work, it comes down to gut instinct. And what I'm talking about here is, you might know it, Gibbs, NCIS, with all the science, ABBEY, if you watch this, this show's been on forever. It's one of the most popular, spun off other shows. But what do they always say? Don't go against Gibbs' gut. His gut knows. They're talking about this higher consciousness, this psychic phenomenon. And I'm going to use that term, higher consciousness, because that's what it is. And we'll see what Edgar Cayce talked about here. Because basically what he said was, it's through higher consciousness, as a side effect of higher consciousness, is the psychic phenomenon. Is where it develops from, as you raise your consciousness. But we have that, whether we want to call it gut instinct or women intuition. We naturally have it, and we know we have it, but it's like, Well, yeah, but personally, I think part of it, and we'll maybe have a chance to discuss this, might be about if you accept that, yeah, we all can, and we can, but if you personally accept it, then you have to accept the responsibility that comes with it. And it's much easier to say, something to think about. And we'll see. It goes along these lines. And we are. Yes, we are all psychic. And I think we've all, I could probably pick everyone out here. And you could give me an experience that you couldn't explain or said, I just knew. Often in dreams. And Cayce would talk about dreams of saying nothing would happen to us that, before that we didn't dream about first. Which is, again, part of the psychic phenomenon, but we're a little bit more comfortable with that. But they pursued it, and of course, how do you get, as I say, how do you get to the psychic or Akashic Hall, or Carnegie Hall? And if you've ever heard that story of the guy running to get to Carnegie Hall for a concert, and he didn't know where it was, and he asked, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? His answer, he was told, well, practice, practice, practice. Yes, that is part of it, and we'll see this is what part of this ability is. Because as Edgar said, every entity has clairvoyant, mystic, and psychic powers. Every one of us. We all have it, and we know it. It's natural. And the thing is, it was interesting, that creative spiritual force within. As I've given these talks before and variations of these talks in different aspects, because there is so much that it's just so incredible out there, and it's all part of the journey. But when I was, putting together about the readings and what Edgar Cayce had said about being psychic and being your own best psychic, I found to me something that was very telling, and I took it to heart as I'm talking to you about this and talking to others about this. That first, it must be lived, it must be desired, practiced within self, in its dealings with its fellow man or fellow human. Do not teach, which is only theory. Live thy experience. I read that, and I read that several times, is that as I'm up here talking and sharing this and hopefully giving some incentive for everyone here and others to pursue this, pursue it in ourselves, because it is our birthright, it is our journey, it is our purpose, of why we're here, of raising this higher consciousness, not just in theory, just not kind of entertainment purposes, as Edgar would call it, trick shooting. When his readings, and he talked about his readings, particularly people, as it came more past lives, people, tell me about my past lives. Everybody wants to be that king or that pharaoh or queen or princess. His answer was basically, you'll get readings on past lives that will help you in this life, that will make you better, that will raise your consciousness in this life. This isn't for entertainment. This is for growth. This is for evolvement into our higher selves, our better selves. So with this, do not teach what's not, live thy own experience. Before we go on, I'm going to share some of my own experiences, in this journey, in my own journey about this, and hopefully my own evolution, not devolution, but hopefully it's been evolution in that process. And one of the things that I talk about all the time is what I found with my own life flowing in decision making and living is learning to stay out of my own way. Kind of that physical self, that monkey mind, allowing that spirit and mind to come forward, and staying out of my own way. And I found it's been an incredible, successful, and a life that I just am thankful for it all the time, from the blessings. And with that, and it's about not only this learning, and this is where, not only in theory, but in practice, because even with others, and I quote, this is from Aldous Huxley from The Divine Within, which is a book I would recommend besides the ones they have up here to read on these subjects. It's a book I would recommend to anyone. It's an incredible book on it. To combine things, to walk this tightrope, to gather data of perception, and analyze it in language, but their time has to come when we have to drop the language and go into the experience. We can talk about this till the cows come home. It's important. We learn from it. But one of the things we need to learn is to the point of going into the experience. It would be like, I've been to the Grand Canyon. I could tell you all about the Grand Canyon, an incredible site, an incredible place, you know, and if I was a really good poet wordsmith, you'd be kind of like, wow, you know, if I had some pictures, even more, maybe a little film clip. But that can only take us so close. You have to go, you have to have the experience. You've all probably had experiences, whether a birth of a child, an incredible sunrise or sunset, that just so affected you, some experience that you can share with others, but you also know you can only share so far. It's going and dropping the language at one point and going into that experience in this higher consciousness. Think about Ezekiel. Ezekiel got into that beatific vision. I mean, you're hitting the Empyrean light of that God consciousness. And he has to come back and say, okay, how do I explain this? Well, it was like wheels within wheels, and they had eyes. We try to bring it back, but it is learning from that, but then taking it into the experience, living it. That's what Edgar was talking about. And as he put it, that was from Aldous Huxley, but Edgar himself, not that it may be even describable in words, for words are merely means of communicating one idea to one individual for another. And of course, I love what Aldous Huxley says. Language is a device for taking the mystery out of reality. If you're living it, it's incredible, it's wonderful. And when we describe it, sometimes we lose it. We're trying to, you know, put it in a box or a niche, you know. It's so much more beyond that. Well, some of my journey started with meditation. You know, I guess they're calling it mindfulness nowadays. But, you know, one of the recommendations that Edgar Cayce was meditation, and very straightforward, a very simple, straightforward meditation, daily meditation ways. Lynn Cayce, his son, who brought back the A.R.E. and it did so much for it until his passing. One of the things he said is the one choice you can make every day is to meditate. That's how important he felt it was. And from my own experience and many others, meditation, daily meditation, you know, is incredible. And it's a journey in its own right. Of course, me being me, besides what Edgar Cayce reading said about and recommended about ways of meditating, I probably got 6 or 8 books on different types of meditation, whether it was, you know, the Buddhist meditation, whether it was TM, you know, whether it was Lectio Divina, you know, I'm gonna learn this. Then I went into the experience. Okay, got my neck and head exercises, got my breathing exercises. I'm gonna meditate. Oh, 30 seconds. Oh, monkey mind. You know, I was like, okay. Well, one of the first things I learned was this is one of the lessons is learning patience with myself, let alone others, and sticking to it, perseverance. So it's like, okay, every day, same time, same place, gonna do this. I'm gonna learn to meditate. And it is a journey. I was, you know, struggling. Monkey mind is like, you know, oh, come on, let's go play. It's like, relax, sit in the corner. Probably after about 2.5, 3 months, I was 10 or 12 minutes, I would say. I was getting up to 10 or 12 minutes of where, really in a meditation, where, and now I understand where trying to explain the experience in the Buddhist tradition, they call Zen koans, those things that don't seem to make any sense. What is the sound of one hand clapping? After learning, being able to meditate 10 or 12 minutes, I got why. Because trying to explain it, it's like, okay, this 10 or 12 minutes, I got up to that point where I was there, but I wasn't there. I was focused in an unfocused way. Now I understand why Zen koans are Zen koans. Because, and I'm not asleep, but I'm not there. Incredible. And I would come out after 10 or 12 minutes and feeling incredibly refreshed, incredibly clear, incredibly calm and peaceful. Now, yeah, now that they have the science, they can tell you all these other things that they're now showing. They can measure meditation does. You know, it's been doing it for thousands of years, but it didn't count till they could measure it. You know, I get it, but it doesn't mean it wasn't working 2,000 years ago. It's not, science has caught up. You know, people feel science measures. You know, and just because if they can't build a tool to measure it doesn't mean it isn't happening. But now they can. But I was stuck. I had this plateau. I was like, oh, okay. Well, besides other things, I talk about, there's meditation music out there, different kinds of music. So I was trying, let me try those. None of them were really working. So then one morning, doing my meditation, I come out, feeling again that incredible refreshness and just clarity. And I started doing, do my office, doing some research and reading things I like to do. And I've got a name stuck in my head, James Asher. I'm doing my stuff, and this, how something gets stuck in your head. Usually it's like a jingle from an advertisement or something, but I've got this name, James Asher, stuck in my head. I'm like, I don't know what James Asher, who's James Asher, and why is he bothering me? And so, but it won't go away. I'm doing more work. I'm like, no, I don't even have any books, and I have a pretty good book collection. No books by James. So thankfully, because of the wonder of the internet, I'm like, all right, this will not go away. Let me Google James Asher. Lo and behold, and I just thank you, universe, thank you, God, got it, appreciate the help. Like the first two names, you get the list of them. The first is James Asher, who's an author, and he's an author of a book called Brain Switching. And actually the book is about, and I'll make this really brief, the book is about brain switching, using what they call your right brain more. And I'm really oversimplifying this, but the science, says now that we pretty much function daily in our left brain. It's a linear, very straightforward, linear, day-to-day brain, mathematical brain, where the right brain is the more artistic, more holistic side of our brain, hemispheres as they go. It's much more than that, but developing use of that more, which is really a better balance and getting into that higher type of consciousness. So I smiled going, interesting, okay. But then the next James Asher was a musician out of England that made meditation CDs. And I'm like, okay, I'm there, I'm with you. So I send away for the book too, but I sent away to England, wrote and sent a check, and about 3-4 weeks later, got that CD. I still have it today. It's called Rivers of Light. And put it on, have my headphones. My plateau of that 10, 12 minutes, I'm into a 30-minute meditation. I'm like, when you participate, the universe participates with you. When you participate with that higher consciousness, whatever term you'd like to use, cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, mind at large, higher consciousness, it will participate with you. It's just incredible. I mean, actually, look up the etymology of the word communion. We're probably all very familiar with the word communion. It means mutual participation is the etymology. It is about participating with the universe, participating with ourselves in that. So I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. Thank you, universe. So I go on, now I'm doing these, and again, just how things are happening, how my life, how my decision making is. It's just incredible. It's suddenly, this meditation, and again, it's taken months and months to reach this, and perseverance, but it's like I've gone from being colorblind to having color vision back, how I'm experiencing, life, and that's just kind of on this level, consciousness level. It's just wonderful, and normally just very subtle. It's not dramatic, but just very subtle, but just an incredible way to live one's life. But you do have experiences on occasion. The next one I'll share is with my youngest son, Corwin. I was living in South Florida at the time, and now I'm probably been doing this 7, 8, 9 months, and I'm doing my 30 minutes a day because this was a daily meditation. At the time, he was a senior in high school. I was divorced, but good news, it was as amicable as those things can be. We both lived in the same town, and with our again, a son, he was a senior in high school. It's like, wherever you want to be. You have a car now. He had a car. Mom's, mine. It's not like you have to be here, you have to be there. And so and he was very, very cognizant and very kind of spending time, sharing time with both of us. At any rate, as a guy, or probably anyone, speaking of your own experience, a car when you're a senior in high school, he loved it. And he was constantly tinkering it. I mean, he was doing great at school, he was working, he was using his money with his car, and he was always doing stuff with it. Now, that's great. Well, I was in one meditation, and I came out, and again, it's that unknown knowing, that cloud of unknowing. I understand why they call it that in some phrases. But I came out and it was like, I had this one meditation, I came out of feeling really refreshed, but it was almost like waking up in the morning where I had this feeling of something went on, but I couldn't remember it. Like you had a dream, and you know you had a dream, but for the life of you, that's all you know. You can't, it's like, I had a dream, I know I had a dream. Well, I came out of this meditation kind of with that sensation, but I was like, okay, you know. Well, as time went on, like I said, with my son, he was telling me at one point, you know, that he was doing stuff with his car. He's like, yeah, I've been looking on Craigslist or whatever, that I'm going to get these new bucket seats for my car. I'm like, hey, your money, good for you. A few weeks go by, or a couple of weeks, I should say, go by, and I'm like, yeah, I wonder if he's going to be here today or over his mom's. You know, if he's going to come over here, you know, I'll make a dinner. You know, I hadn't really had plans, but let me check. I'll make a point of making dinner. So I call, and he goes, oh, Dad, I'm down in Miami, which was about an hour and a half south of us. Dad, I'm down in Miami. I'm getting those seats I told you about. That meditation, what my experience came back. And I'm like, Corwin, are you with three guys? And I described these three guys and what they're wearing. And I said, and do they have like a boxy van, like a boxy minivan? You know, I'm like, it's a maroon boxy minivan. And then I'm like, I still remember on the phone, I'm like an Astro van. I don't know if you guys remember the Astro vans. They were those boxy minivans, really square type, almost mini UPS truck, boxy minivans. And there's this big pause on the phone. And I'm like, Corwin, you there, Corwin? And finally he goes, Dad, you're scaring me. I'm like, what, is everything all right? He goes, you just described the three guys I'm buying the seats from, what they're wearing, and they have a maroon Astro van. I don't know who's more freaked out, him or me. I'm like, really? Yeah, really? I'm like, whoa, you know, because when he said it, I mean, it just came back. So at any rate, I said, well, okay, no problem. I said, oh, by the way, you're going to be here for dinner? And yeah, when I finish here. Well, so, you know, a couple hours later, he comes up, and I'm still kind of like, whoa. He gets to the house, he comes running to the door, he goes, what the heck are you doing? You freaked me out. He says, I'm driving home looking over my shoulder. It's like, you know, who you got following me? What's going on? I'm like, you know, of course, he's known me for years. He goes, this stuff you're doing. I'm like, yeah, and, you know, and it was just amazing. But here's, you know, that first experience, which was a very almost anecdotal personal experience. But here's an experience, you know, that I'm sharing that another person, yes, my son, I could say, look, he'll tell you, you know, this went on. And I can tell you to this day, I really feel that perhaps because of the way he said, oh man, it put me on so alert, I was looking over my shoulder, that maybe this experience, you know, occurred, that we had a connection where maybe prevent something from negative from him happening down in Miami. I don't know, you know, but really incredible experience along those lines. And again, kind of from finding the right music to get into this higher, you know, place to this experience. And then, you know, the next one I'll share with you, again, kind of takes it another step. It was when I was in Glastonbury. I was actually on a tour, not one I was leading, like Rosie was talking about, but I was on a tour. This was 2010. If you ever get a chance to go to England, or make sure you go to Glastonbury. Whatever else you do, it's incredible. The town, not only the town and the people are wonderful, but the site, the Chalice Well, the Glastonbury Tor, the Abbey grounds, just incredible. And the history of Glastonbury goes back thousands upon thousands of years in that area. Somerset area goes back 4,000 or 5,000 BC. Glastonbury, they found on the grounds remains of at least the Roman times, if not earlier. So it's really an incredible area. At any rate, on this tour, and we stop at Glastonbury, and you know, we've got maybe 24, 25 people there, and they're like, have at it, you know, go on the grounds. And also, England, Great Britain is incredible. It truly is a country, as they say, a country of gardeners. Because you're here at Glastonbury Ruins, it looks like you're on a golf course that they've put, it's just absolutely beautiful. So we're strolling along, and you know, as tourists, you have hundreds of acres you're roaming around. They just kind of say, okay, be back by 5. So you're just roaming around, and so you're kind of mixing and matching with people you met on tour. And I happened to be walking with this woman, Maria, as we're walking along, coming up to this, taking pictures, seeing this, incredible, remains of this abbey, the cathedral. So walking up, you'll see, and I'm showing this because you see how wide open it is, and you'll see there's this little fenced area that, we're kind of walking up to as we're chatting and just enjoying the sight. Well, as we get up to it, here, again, like it's a park. Here, you got, people walking wide open. They're walking their dogs. Here's this, in the middle of the remains of the cathedral. They've fenced off this area. It's the high altar. This is where basically in the cathedral of Glastonbury Abbey, the Holy of Holies. This is the high altar there. And again, I love how they do things there. It's just like they just put a little fence around it. They don't put big walls or windows. It's like they just expect you to, be appreciative and don't walk on the high altar. And it's so really incredible. And you see it's wide open. So we're standing there looking at it, looking around going, wow. And I'm like, I'm looking around because I feel like I'm in a cloud of incense. I feel like I'm at a high mass. I'm waiting to hear Latin, and the scents are going. Because I'm looking around going, okay, who's burning incense? Which wouldn't surprise me, at a place like that. But I'm looking around. You can see it's wide open. And I don't see anybody. But I'm not saying anything. I'm just kind of looking. And I'm looking at her, figured maybe I'm like, so finally, she's not seeming to say anything. So finally I said, and again, I also understand how powerful the mind is and how powerful suggestion is. So I'm trying to be very careful. So I go, Maria, do you smell anything? Of course, we saw the dog, so she's going, I'm like, no, I don't mean, But she's like, she goes, I do. She goes, it smells like incense. So I'm like, I'm feeling like Scooby-Doo, ruh-roh. Because again, trying to be very careful, I said, really? She goes, yeah, it smells like incense. So I'm like, Maria, I feel like I'm in a cloud of it. I feel like I'm in a cloud. So now we're trying to figure it out. Now we're like, okay. And I'll show you a picture of it from, you saw as it coming in how wide open this is. Here is now looking back the way we walked in. It's wide open spaces all around us, and so I'm walking in one direction, she's walking in another, get 10, 15 feet away from that high altar, that odor of incense goes away. Walk back to it, back in it. I mean, to the point where I actually pulled up some of the grass because I'm figuring, well, maybe there's something in the grass. Maybe something they sprayed, or there's actually stuff called lemongrass that smells like lemon, not incense. But I'm like, no, that's not it. And then, we're looking at all these ways trying to figure out how could this possibly could have happened? Where's it coming from? And, okay, a little breeze coming this way, 10, 15 feet away from the altar, the odor goes away. Come back to it. So we're scratching our head here. I'm like, this is interesting. Then we see another person from the tour, walking through it. I call her Elizabeth. We're like, hey, Elizabeth, come over. And like, oh, don't say anything. Let's see if Elizabeth smells anything. She comes over. We're talking. We're chatting and waiting to see, And I'm looking over at Maria, and I could see her going, I still, And I'm waiting. So finally, we're talking about the site and everything. Finally, I'm like, Elizabeth, do you smell anything? Of course, she checked her shoes too because of that dog. But she goes, no, I don't smell a thing. So now it's like, okay, this got even more interesting. I feel like I'm in a cloud. Maria smells it to a certain extent. She doesn't smell it at all. And we're at this high altar in this incredible, the history of Glastonbury, holy, the incredible site area. So we move on. Interesting experience, it seems. We move on. And out of the shot of this picture, close by to this as we're walking, is actually a modern building they put together where, from the archaeology and research, they have a bunch of the older things they've found at Glastonbury that they've put in this museum. Some of the Roman stuff, some of the early Abbey stuff, because the Abbey was destroyed in the 1500s. It goes back to the 600s, if not earlier itself, and again, habitation and other thatched churches earlier than that. So they have this evidence there. So as we walk in there and we're walking around, she goes, Don, don't look. Of course, what do you do when somebody says that, right? It's what? And she's got her hand up on this pillar that has a timeline of Glastonbury Abbey. She goes, don't look at Maria, come on, show me. I mean, I can wait here longer than you can keep your arm up there. And so, here it is. And I looked into this. This happened in 1077 AD. Abbot Thurston, and this is Normans and Saxons at the time, but Abbot Thurston is dismissed after his soldiers kill 6 monks on the high altar. We had no knowledge of this. And it's like, those are monks trying to get out now. But and it's like, and she goes, "You were one of them," which was kind of freaky, but pinged on me. Because again, I felt like I was in this cloud of it, and I can tell you, over the years, I've only had 2 readings. You know, I know I'm usually too busy working at the at your psychic fairs, but in the years past, and besides going through these processes, I've had 2 readings, and again, I'm this kind of poker saying, okay, let's see, you know, what they have to offer. And they were like a year apart, and each time they both had told me that I had a past life as a monk, and I hadn't shared this with anyone on this. And so this was a really fascinating experience of the experience at the high altar, not knowing and then finding out that what occurred there. I mean, so again, you see, and these don't happen often, but you see the levels, again, at this point I'd been almost 8 years being in daily meditation, you know, and just how it made me feel, my life and my health. But, you know, the experience like this that occurred from James Asher to finding meditation music to the experience with my son in Miami to, you know, this, you know, and they're byproducts. They're byproducts, really, the psychic phenomenon of living a better life, of living a more spiritual life, really, raising your higher consciousness. But, you know, just incredible. So I wanted to share those as we're talking about this, not just to do it in theory, as Edgar said, but living it and practice in my own experiences in it. And as we move on, you know, I'll share this picture with you because I think this is an incredible picture for what we're talking about here. This is it's colorized. It was black and white, of course, by the time. This is by Gustave Doré, who did the ink drawings for Dante's Divine Comedy, which included the Inferno, which most people know. It's funny, everybody knows Dante's Divine Inferno, but we always forget, oh, he also had Purgatorio and Paradiso. Paradise also. It was a 3-part series. We never went past the first part, and we always went to the negative end. But this is Paradiso, and this is a colorized version of what Doré drew for him, and this is the Empyrean light. And the Empyrean light is the light of the universal mind, of the God consciousness. This is the highest level. And I think people that really touch Ezekiel and many others, when you really touch it in that meditation, that higher consciousness, it's something you experience along this line. I mean, the psychic kind of experiences I've talking about are side effects to a much higher level, a much higher consciousness we're talking about here. And one of the reasons I share this, not only I find it incredible, and I think Doré had some good insight to what he was drawing here, is how Dante got there. Because in this, remember, in Dante's, in these levels of Inferno and Purgatorio and in Paradise, each had levels, and he had guides, kind of like Milton's Paradise Lost, but he had guides taking up through all the levels. When he got to Paradise, Beatrice was his guide through most of the levels. Now Beatrice, it makes sense, Beatrice was his true love in life. Who better to guide him in Paradise than his actual true love? But the interesting part is at the very top level, when he was going to the very top level, Beatrice was no longer his guide. Beatrice gave him off to another guide. And who Beatrice gave him to was Saint Bernard. And I share this because I find it really fascinating that Dante himself, for that Empyrean light, to that highest consciousness, to that God consciousness, had Saint Bernard. Who Saint Bernard was the abbot, the Christian mystic and abbot of the Cistercian monks in France. And basically, today they're still around. You might have heard of Thomas Keating or Thomas Merton, who have written incredible books on meditation and higher consciousness in Christian meditation. There's actually, everybody thought meditation came from the Far East. Guess what? It's been in the West for thousands of years also. It just got tucked away in monasteries. The Latin term is lectio divina. It's there, and there are several other, contemplative prayer. And he chose St. Bernard because St. Bernard is credited as that mystic of bringing back meditation into Christian tradition. To give you a brief idea of how incredible this St. Bernard is, and chosen by Dante for this, you might have heard of St. Malachi, the Bishop of Ireland, who probably is best known for his papal prophecies, the St. Malachi prophecies of the prophecies of giving a list of the 100 at his time of the 112 popes that were to come, and that they've tracked, that they seem to be on track. Well, the interesting thing with St. Malachi, he was a huge fan of St. Bernard. When he was actually visiting him in France, he asked for 5 of his monks to bring back to Ireland to train his monks. He wrote, actually, St. Malachi wrote St. Bernard's biography. He actually was asked to be buried in France at their abbey. I mean, this is the incredible stuff for that. So, kind of telling us it's that meditation, it's raising that higher consciousness that reaches there, and because we don't go to heaven, we grow to heaven. We really do that evolution to it, that raising that higher consciousness. So it's just something to think about along those lines. Of course, some might know St. Bernard. Interestingly enough, St. Bernard better for what the other thing he's kind of known for. He wrote the charter for the Knights Templar, curiously enough. So, some of the background experience is that this is really about that meditation. It's really about raising that higher consciousness and the psychic phenomenons and our ability to have these experiences to help us come from, and following through with how Edgar Cayce, as they pursued this. And this was really great that they pursued this with Edgar Cayce. After all, here's this incredible psychic. So they did ask, how are you doing this? Over years. And as he put it, they said, give us the definition of the psychic phenomenon. Of course, very straightforward. Psychic means spirit of the soul, which psychic is Greek defined spirit soul. So he's very straightforward. And the phenomenon is only the act itself, brought to the attention or manifest in such a way to bring the attention to the individual, to the work itself, to bring it into this realm, so to speak, to bring it back, you could say, to live it. In the imagination or mind. In the broader sense, the phenomenon of psychic forces is the material as the forces become visible in the material physical plane. We experience it in this plane. Something to think about. This plane is just a very small part of reality, and this is by the scientists, by the physicists and cosmologists. Just really briefly, we only basically participate in about 5% of the universe, what they call regular matter. 95% of the universe is what they call dark energy, dark matter. Not dark bad, it's just that they know that's what the majority is, that we can infer it's there. So if you think about that, we're barely in reality of our universe that we're participating with. And kind of what Edgar is saying here, this is what we're coming back and translating into what we have here. And that how we experience it, very interesting, depends upon the development of the individual. And as he puts it, how far distant the entity is from the plane of the spirit of force. How close are we? Or how far have we taken ourselves away? How deeply have we got into physicality? How much amnesia do we have of our true spiritual selves? The more we raise our consciousness, our higher consciousness, our spiritual consciousness, the better we connect. They're telling us right here. It's like having a radio that's not turned on. It's all out there. But if you don't turn on that radio, you're not going to experience any of it. And you're going to have to tune it too, by the way. But at any rate, but it's there, and it's what we're here for. And it's wonderfully unique. How many types of psychic phenomena are known to mankind at the present? As many as there are individuals, each entity being a force or a world within themselves. We all are unique. And this is that wonderful part of being unique to ourselves, but one. There's a oneness that we all share with this. But in that shareness of that oneness, we don't lose ourselves. We keep our uniqueness. Ego goes away. But the uniqueness, knowing ourselves remains in that oneness. I mean, it's just a wonderful, almost a Zen koan, but it's so true and it's so beautiful. So we will see everything individual. I mean, and our physical world mirrors that, shows us that, whether it's fingerprints, whether it's retinal scans, whether it's snowflakes. They all may look the same. They all share a oneness, but they're all unique, not one like the other. And you don't lose that, you know? That snowflake that unique snowflake that nothing else is like, when it melts into a drop of water and then flows into the ocean, you may not, in this body, be able to tell the difference from one to the other. Doesn't mean that snowflake, now that it's just transformed form, doesn't know. It keeps its uniqueness. It's remember that, we're limited. So, hence in the true form of the psychic meaning, the expression to the material world of the latent or hidden sense of the soul and spirit forces, whether manifest from behind and or through the material plane. There's so much more out there. Science will tell you that. Spirit tells you that. Spiritual philosophies tell you that. But we have that, kind of approach avoidance. It's there, embrace it. And how many channels are there through all forces? How do they manifest? In every possible way. Voices, visions, impressions, or feelings, or one I shared with you, in sense of smell. And I've talked to other people that have had that sense of someone that they've been close to, a man or woman that they know they're in, when suddenly, out of nowhere, where they shouldn't be smelling some perfume, or something like that, know that Mary's here, something like that. So, these are just some of it. If we're willing to, subjugate, relax ourselves, get out of our own way. And he gives us great advice for anybody who's developing this and wants to develop it, and why it's there, what it's all about, is that it's to help. There's an ideal behind the psychic purpose, and it's built upon the spiritual ideal. And when he was asked questions, if you're going to do this, how questions, the answer was by better questions. And better we mean relief from pain, suffering of any kind or character without the expense of another individual. And these are questions for yourself or for others, in that psychic sense. When it's better for others, when you help in pain or injury without the cost of any other individual. And there's a great example of that in the Edgar Cayce readings, or experiences that occurred in the early Edgar Cayce readings. Again, he would go into that self-hypnotic trance kind of state, and they would ask him questions, and there'd be like a conductor and a stenographer to take the notes. And the thing is, and he wouldn't remember what occurred. He would actually, when they would wake him up, he'd ask, well, did you get anything? And he'd read whatever notes they had. Well, early on, he had his father called the gentleman, his father called the squire, would conduct some of these readings. Because in the beginning, actually, not only the beginning, but if Edgar Cayce was alive today with his psychic ability, today he'd be considered a medical intuitive. Over 2/3 of his readings were medically related. We know him from so much more, but primarily he would be considered a medical intuitive. So many of these readings were medically related. Well, his father, was doing the conductor while Edgar was in this state. Well, after a while, Edgar was getting these excruciating migraine headaches, and he was having difficult even being able to do readings and having all these migraine headaches, and he couldn't understand why. Well, then it came out. His dad, while he was in a trance state with a couple of his buddies taking notes, was getting medical advice to get for the person who asked for the reading. Before they brought him out, would then ask about some races going on. Hey, who's going to win the 4th in Pimlico? True. Get answers, and was making bets and making money. Hence, without the expense of another individual. You don't use it the way it's supposed to. It's called higher consciousness for a reason. It's our higher selves. And this is what was happening, to give you that example, and pulling him away, the difficulty of having the experience. And not only for yourself, but as he put it, Edgar Cayce is in the state of being guided by the individual who makes the suggestion. so long as the suggestions are in chord and in the mind of the individual is kept in a chord, correct, shaded just that much. Even the person he's getting the reading from, or the person that's asking the question, has an effect. And I think we all have experienced that. As I put it, I think we all know our Eeyores in our lives. If you know Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore, that, hey, we're going to go have a picnic today. It's going to be a great sunny day. It's probably going to rain. Probably going to be ants all over the way. I'm probably going to get, a rash. Right? We know these people, and what does it do? It just brings you down. We've probably been at parties or gatherings where you see somebody come in with a smile on their face, hey, and you're like, hey, and you see somebody else come in with that cloud and that storm, and you're like, it does affect us. It does affect our perceptions and does affect how we tune into things. So keep that in mind. Keep it positive. You can't always avoid the Eeyores, but you don't have to listen to them. Let's put it that way. And what is, to me, amazing is Edgar Cayce himself. We know we're here because he is such an incredible psychic and really took himself to task, if you think about it. Do you know of any other psychics that kept records of all the readings they gave? Over 42 years, over 14,000 readings. He kept records of them all. Go upstairs, over 50,000 pages of material. The only other psychic I can think of that kept anywhere near those records was Nostradamus. Because taking himself to, you'd think more psychics would have that foresight, but he also took himself to task in an incredible way, because people are still going through them, been going through them for decades. Some trying to prove him wrong unsuccessfully, but also finding incredible information. I mean, it's really amazing. But he himself, with this amazing ability, his higher consciousness, his psychic ability evolved. It didn't stay stagnant. His own abilities evolved. He raised his own consciousness through the years. His very first reading for himself in 1910, for himself, they asked, and it makes sense, how do you do this, And his answer was, the subconscious mind of Edgar Cayce is in direct communication with all other subconscious minds. In direct communication with all other subconscious minds. And is capable of interpreting through his objective mind and imparting the impression received to other objective minds, gathering this way knowledge possessed by millions of subconscious minds. I mean, that's incredible. And the information available, if you think about it, we talk about Google, now, here's your original true Ethernet connection here. I mean, into the ethers he was. Now, that was the first reading for him in 1910. 22 years later, fortunately, they asked him a similar question. How do you do this? The answer had changed. The answer had evolved. Edgar's higher consciousness, his own consciousness had evolved. The answer then, 22 years later, was in varied ways then, or developments of this individual entity, Edgar Cayce. The source may be from the subconscious forces that we saw, that it said in 22 years before, or from the realm of the spirit force that may surround the body, or a combination of both, or from the universal consciousness that is the source of life itself. That's a lot more than just, not that tapping into millions of subconscious minds is not impressive in its own, but these higher orders, he himself, because he was a very spiritual person. Not only was he incredibly psychic, I mean, he was known. He had read the Bible for every year of his life. He had read it through. He taught Bible school. His whole philosophy, this incredible spiritual man, and helping others at no expense. Probably the only expense was to himself, if that, but incredible. And how his own abilities, his own higher consciousness evolved. I mean, and he talked about it. Because they asked more, and I share this because it's really interesting how it's not just Edgar Cayce. What we're talking about, the information here, this is not just Edgar Cayce readings. Years afterwards, and in some cases decades, people like Dr. Broad, a philosopher from Cambridge University, Aldous Huxley, and others, T.L. Desjardins, these incredible geniuses and polymaths, decades later, say the same thing about our consciousness. He was just saying it about 50 years before they were. But he talked about his experience and how he went through this. And we said, you know, I was talking about earlier about trying to bring this back into words and get it explained to people. Because they asked him, well, what's your experience as you're doing this? And he kind of said, you know, he's following this like beam of light, you know, this dot of light that he's following. But he said, as he kind of puts it, I become conscious of sounds, and that there's music and laughter, and it gets louder, and there's more and more sounds and happier and singing, and it gets to the head of the blending of sound and color. That, you know, how do you blend sound and color? Well, the blending of sound and color come together. And then he says, you know, quite suddenly I come to a hall of records. It's a hall without walls, without ceilings. I've never heard of a hall described having no walls, no ceiling. I don't think that's the general definition of a hall. But when you're in this experience, this is where you go from the words, from the learning, from the books, from the talks, into the experience, and you're trying to bring it back. Okay, I was in a hall. The hall didn't have any ceiling, didn't have any walls, but it was a hall. But this is trying to bring it back, trying to share this. And this is where he'd get his information, his life readings, as an example. You know, and the thing is, what I find fascinating, because he talks about sound. He says it was sound, and it was a sound blending in everything. You know, because we always hear about the light. Well, the interesting thing, in other readings for Cayce, he talked about that everything was sound, or vibratory, which is meaning sound. Everything is vibratory. Everything has a frequency. Everything is vibratory. Absolutely correct. And he's saying that's how this world, how our universe was created in the readings. Now, this is what science is saying. The big microwave background, cosmic microwave background means Big Bang. But what they're saying now is that what they found, now that they have the science to measure it, tiny variation reveal the imprints of sound waves. And these are the seeds. These imprints of sound waves are the seeds from which matter grew, forming stars and galaxies. If you go in the readings, that's exactly what Edgar Cayce said. Exactly. Just way ahead. Just incredible. And if you think about it, before there was light, there was sound. Because God said, let there be light. He spoke it first. But this is this Akashic record that he would go up to, you know, and share with. And bringing that, you know, this higher consciousness that everything vibrated back. And I put this because, and there's much more to this, but just to get that feel, that share of it, exactly, because they talk about us being stardust, you know, and being this universal mind. On your left is a picture of a supernova, the sound waves from a supernova. And it's colorized. This is from the University of Arizona, and I've gotten permission from the professor there to use it. But it's the sound waves of the different frequencies of the supernova. Next to it is a PET scan of your brain. I mean, this is like the kymatics, Han Jenny's kymatics, Rupert Sheldrake's, you know, anthropomorphizing from vibration. What science is saying, for the universe was created from those sound prints. And we're seeing from spirit to mind to matter. You know, what better universal kind of idea of universal mind I wanted to share than that? I mean, there's this unity, this oneness to this all. But as we go forward, because this is, again, as I said, not only Edgar Cayce talking about this, but many incredible people talking about this. This is, again, Aldous Huxley, and actually this is where he's quoting Dr. Broad, the philosopher from Cambridge, that we just have to part the veils, open these gates. This is our hierarchy. This is our birthright, our journey, and it's developing ourselves, being prepared for it. Because as they put it, each person, and this isn't Edgar Cayce, this is Dr. Broad, each person at each moment is capable of remembering all that has ever happened to him or her, or perceiving everything that's happening everywhere in the universe. Imagine if you could do that. But imagine if you did that and you weren't ready for it. That's when you need to unplug the thing. But this is, and what they believe is, I mean, everywhere in the universe at the time, basically what Edgar was saying he was doing, and this is, again, decades later, the function of the brain and the nervous system is to protect us from being overwhelmed. Our physical self is to protect us when we're not ready to get plugged in like this, until we raise our consciousness, until we do this meditation and develop ourselves. By shutting out most of what we would have otherwise perceived or remember at any moment and leaving only a very small special selection of what's practically useful. If you're plugged in, you'd have it, without practice and development, you'd have a tough time walking across the room. Because this isn't the big thing. And as they put it, as they called it, the mind at large has to be funneled through that reducing valve of the brain. We just get that measly drop in nervous system. What comes out the other end is the measly trickle of consciousness. But we can develop this, and we can do this. And this is from Doors of Perception. Not Divine Within, I talked about one of Aldous Huxley's books. This is Doors of Perception, or through the Cayce readings themselves. But then it goes on. Certain persons, however, seem to be born with a kind of bypass that circumvents the reducing valve. And others' temporary bypasses may be acquired either spontaneously or as a result of deliberate spiritual exercises or through hypnosis. Deliberate spiritual exercises. Edgar Cayce talks about meditation. Edgar Cayce himself would do besides his spiritual exercises, would put himself in a self-hypnotic trance. To reach that, to this mind at large, this universal consciousness. Now, to tell you about how much awareness and how we just get this measly trickle of awareness to get through day by day. And this is a very brief little awareness experiment. And Kevin Grant's going to help me out here, but briefly what I'm going to show, and it's very short, you're going to see two teams, one wearing black, one wearing white. And it announces why. I believe it's the white team. They'll ask you to count how many times they pass the ball back and forth. And we'll see the results, and you'll see just how much or how little our awareness is, how little that reducing valve is. Kevin, could you run it? I'm going to ask you to pause it at one point.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Okay. Pause it there. Thank you, Kevin. Oh, good job, boy. You're doing your psychic exercises even before I said that. Very good. All right. Everybody probably has a count. I won't ask, but probably has a count of how many times the team passed the ball. And they'll continue this on. What I will ask is, how many saw the dancing moonwalking bear? One. What? Yeah. What dancing moonwalking bear? All right, Kevin, let's go ahead and run it the rest of the way.
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Did I do that? Sorry, Kevin. Thank you. There he is, right in the middle of the screen. We think we're aware. Yeah, how aware are we really? And that's just in physicality, let her higher awareness. This is something that's developed, something we practice. Slowly but surely. And it will become natural. But I think that's a great example of that. We think we know what's going on around us. Not as much as we'd like to. But again, it's about that reducing valve. So what did Edgar say about how to do this? His answer was very, very straightforward. Meditation. What I've been talking about here. And he was very clear and very straightforward about it. Meditation. How will he develop this psychic ability? May same be developed giving a certain given period to concentrate his body physically, mentally, entering the silence. Come apart from the outside world, the thoughts, perceptions of the outside forces. Alone entering into the silence for 15 to 20 minutes a day. See? Now in the beginning it'll be 15 or 30 seconds, but you'll develop. It's worth it. if this is what we're seeking, and again, it's seeking really higher consciousness and spiritualizing matter, as Edgar would put it, and the byproduct will be the psychic, but it's all about, that connecting, that unity, that oneness they have. And just going into that silence, that cloud of unknowing, as the title of a book written by a monk in the 12th century, going into that place, because it's in meditation we really claim ourselves. And I really love this quote from Edgar, because back in the time when you're doing this meditation, been again around for 1,000 years, but in Western world it's like, man, what's this meditation stuff, Getting a little more acceptance now is mindfulness, but what he said, and I understand why Lin said what he said, that the one choice you have every day is to meditate, is that in the readings, this is 281, there are others that care not whether there be such things at meditation. And that's true, we all know that. Some people, what's that hoo-ha? There are others that care not as meditation, but the answer, but depend upon someone else to do their thinking, or are satisfied to allow circumstances to take their course. Do you want to claim yourselves? Do you want to claim yourselves, your awareness, claim your life, and hope that sometime, somewhere, conditions and circumstances will adjust themselves to such a way that the best may be their lot? Remember communion? It's about mutual participation. And so much more. It's attuning the mental and the physical body to its spiritual source. Very straightforward. And if you take that time, that perseverance, if for some reason, if I'm traveling in planes and connections and, I don't get to I feel it. It's rare that it happens, but there are some things that happen where I don't really get a chance to do the 30-minute meditation I like to, maybe a short, light one. I feel the difference. It really makes it, because not only do you claim yourselves, you claim your higher selves, because it's a touchstone to your highest ideal, and as Cayce would put it, because then meditate upon that which is the highest ideal within self, and that'll change, and that'll evolve itself. Maybe it is God is one, maybe it's God is love, maybe it's something else, but you have that, and you go in with that affirmation, and it's important to go in with a spiritual affirmation, because it's kind of like that radio I was talking about. Do you want to tune your radio, or do you want somebody else to tune your radio for you? Of course, I'm sure you've all gone on long road trips when somebody else controls the radio. You're usually not too happy about it. You want to, and it's better. And that highest ideal you go in with tunes yourself. If you just go into a meditation with no kind of ideal or no kind of direction, who knows? Go in with that ideal. Go in that focus. Go in with your map. Of where you want to be in that higher consciousness. Raise the vibrations from the lower self, the lower consciousness, through the centers of the body to the temple of thy mind. And listen, for it's not in the storm, it's not in the noise, but in the small voice that rises within. I've given you some of the experience, and they happen, few and far between, because that's not the point. It is just that raising that consciousness and that amazing quietness, but that is so much more. That place. Because it also invites the answers. That's why, Edgar Cayce and the psychic fairs. And I hope if they all learn this, your psychic fairs might be out of business, but I think we're going to be okay for a while. But you can, as Edgar himself said, by listening within, there is the answer, and the answer to every problem as you develop this, as you do this. We can, and we know, but I think sometimes it's like we want somebody else to tell us. We always seem to want intermediaries, rather than take that direct part of ourselves, I'm not sure. Well, I think it's a responsibility thing. I mean, even actually you go back in the Bible, and I forget if it was kings or judges, where Moses, the people wanted him, and Moses saying, no, you don't. And he goes, yeah, we do. We seem to have this desire to have someone to do it for us, be that intermediary. When it's our relationship, and it's our higher consciousness, within ourselves. By listening within, there's that answer to every problem. And he gives the directions. When that material or mental aid is sought, and this is material or mental aid is sought, answer the problem in consciousness of self. Figure out what you think the answer is. be aware of it. This is you're bringing in with you. Then seek a verification in that period of meditation, and this aid will be the greater. We can do this. And I found myself so often now, in, I guess it's 14 years or so now of daily meditation, so often I don't even, just know it. I won't say it's rote, but it gets ingrained into you where you're not worrying over decisions or fretting, in that doing it years and years and years of trying to, and it's a practice. I haven't perfected it. It's a practice. But it guides me as to just living day to day. It makes life much easier. And we can do this all ourselves. We can, as Edgar would put it, we're our own best psychics, if we're willing to be, if we want to be. And how Edgar put it, and I love it because what he was saying, this is from Aldous Huxley too, says the same thing, and I love how he put it. But I knew the way of contemplation, meditation at its height, but not yet in its fullness. For in its fullness is the way of Mary, includes the way of Martha, and raises it to a higher power. The way of Mary includes the way of Martha. This struck me, this made so much sense, and it resonated so incredibly, because this is from the Bible. He's talking about the way Mary and Martha, and what he's talking about here is that experience when Jesus was talking to the crowds and his disciples were following him, and he went in a house. And of course, they're all going in with him. They want to hear, the words from the Master, learn all this, And Mary sits down by his feet because she wants to do it. And Martha's going around trying to make sure everybody's got a place to sit and some water or something. She's kind of a little upset. But what Aldous is saying here is both. It's not just meditation and going up on some mountain, being a hermit and staring at your navel, but it's the application. It's helping others in that process. As you raise your higher consciousness and you have, this intuition, this psychic abilities and this higher consciousness, is to apply it, as Edgar would put it. Edgar Cayce, the application was so important, not just theory, but to apply it in day-to-day life. If you think about it, Jesus was in the crowds constantly. He rarely retreated to kind of re-energize himself, refocus himself in meditation, but he didn't stay there. He was in there helping others. And I love the term you used, the active contemplative. Now we're back to our Zen koans, almost active contemplative. But yeah, this is it. Finding it's in raising our higher self, but then using it, participating, mutual participation, helping others. This is what it's about. The saint, the man who's in Eckhart's phrase, and not, this is Meister Eckhart, the Christian mystic he's talking about here, is ready to come down from seventh heaven in order to bring a cup of water to his sick brother. The Eastern traditions, this is a bodhisattva, one who's reached enlightenment, but has remained on earth to help others. And as it's put in their tradition, if I do not go to hell to help the suffering being, who else will go? If the hells are not empty, I will not become a Buddha. Only when all have been saved will I attain Bodhi. It's raising that consciousness. It's that contemplative prayer. It's that meditation, but it's that active contemplative. I mean, it sounds like jumbo shrimp. It sounds like a contradiction, that active contemplative, but it makes so much sense. This is what it's about. It is that communion, that true communion with each other and with our higher selves and with a higher consciousness. It's that mutual participation. It's really wonderful. So it's that middle path. It's not monkey mind in the beginning, like I said, trying to subjugate that, nor it is disappearing it up on a mountain for the rest of my life. But it's taking that time to listen to that, taking that 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes a day, listening to that small voice, clearing myself, but then participating. It's all there. Now there are attunement accessories, and I put this up there. I found this picture and I love it because this is so often how someone that says they have psychic abilities and stuff, maybe that's why this bad PR years back, why we keep it at arm's length. People thought, the great Alexander, crystal seer, has his turban, has his knows all, sees all, tells all. We know better. Look at Edgar. He just laid down on a couch. And they asked him questions and he answered. I don't need this. And I found this in the readings because I smiled so much because this is the picture we get, the whole thing here. Somebody asked him, will I develop any psychic powers by looking into a crystal ball? And his answer was, yes. The crystal offers rather, the crystal offers rather the concentration of physical powers and thus offers many channels for the entering of many influence, yet if it is only held in his name, in his right, much may be received. Yes, but with a warning. Because anything like this, concentration of physical powers, but it's like the radio I was talking about. What are you tuned to or not tuned to? You know, that you can do that. And I think from my experiences, what I've seen through the years, I understand the crystal, like the crystal balls, pendulums, tarot cards, tea readings. They're to keep, and I'm oversimplifying, but it's to keep that left brain busy. Give the kid a toy so the right brain, that holistic side, can come up, that higher consciousness. You know, chanting. It's all repetitive. None of it's complicated, but it's all repetitive to keep the baby quiet so the adult can raise their consciousness up. The same thing, but the key is, as he said in meditation, is have that affirmation. If you're using these, you're going in there with that highest ideal. This is just our focal aspects of it. But I love it because then he goes in there, he tries to tell him, but the reading continues. Well, give guidance that will help me develop this. Answer, rather presumptuous, aren't we? Rather presumptuous is to take this means first, but rather before know that there has been the still small voice from within that he will guide. Yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You don't run a marathon the first day. You get out there, start walking first. So I just get a great humor out of this about getting into that higher consciousness and trying to explain it and bringing it back and developing it. Because, as I said, it's the alchemy, what I call the alchemy of the experience. They talk about alchemy was changing lead into gold. Well, yes, changing this three-dimensional, material world into that higher consciousness, into that greater experience. And what does it is that experience is when we drop the words and go into the experience. And it was put very well in what's called general semantics. They call it the map is not the territory. The name is not the thing in itself. And it's so important to remember that. We have a map, and it will get us from point A to point B, get us across the country. And you can just look at that, or now we have Garmin's and everything. You can look at that, and that'll get you all the way across. But have you really seen the territory if you do that? No, the map is not the territory. I know, it can tell us a lot of things, but it's not the experience of the territory itself. And we have to remember that. We have to go into that experience, go into that territory. The name is not the thing in itself. My name's Don. Does that define me? Do your names define you? You're more than the name. We have to remember that, going into that experience, And think of it this way. What we have here, this three-dimensional world, is a map. Don't mistake it for the territory. The higher consciousness and a much greater universal consciousness really is the territory. Try to keep that in mind. And going into that experience, and it will seem difficult, but it will develop in that aspect. And to help along those lines, to understand that higher consciousness, what it is to experience that, you might say, and also how difficult to bring it back and share it, that it is about the experience and getting to that point. I'm going to share this animation, and it's from What the Belief. It's one of their public services they give, and it's called Flatland. And it's a book I'd also recommend. It was written just in the early 1900s by a gentleman by the name of ABBEY. Called Flatland, very small, short book, but wonderful, because it's talking about how two-dimensional creatures would experience life or experience their world, and how they would interact, how they perceive three-dimensional creatures. And just how we would experience fourth or fifth dimensions, you might say, of higher consciousness. Again, going back to science right now, string theories and other things like that basically say the universe has at least 8 dimensions. I have enough problems with 3. But they're saying there are at least 8 dimensions, actually up to 32. So trying to wrap my head around this gives you an idea, but also gives you about where we're going into that experience. Kevin, if you would, please.
Welcome to Flatland, a world of only 2 dimensions. Only forwards and backwards, left and right. In this world, there is no up and no down.
I said to Ray, where's Dottie? He said, well, she's out in line.
Where's that from? What the bleep is that thing? Huh?
In this world, the 2-dimensional beings that live here have no concept of 3-dimensional objects. These 2-dimensional flatlanders have no understanding of cubes, spheres, tetrahedrons, or yours truly. From their 2D perspective, my 3D finger looks something like this.
What the planet is that?
Hello, little circle. Fear of the unknown. Or should I say, not yet known. It's a puzzle. If we see only what we know, how does anyone ever see anything new? The unknown. How do we ever get out of our box? Hello, little circle. Don't be afraid.
Who said that? Where are you?
This is always the tricky part to explain. I'm in another dimension, another space. I am above you.
No, never use that word.
What word?
The A word.
Above?
It's forbidden.
Well, what do you think it means?
I don't know, and I don't want to know. You can be severely punished if you use that word. Are you a ghost?
I hope not. I just have a different perspective than you do. I can see things in a way you can't yet.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, okay, you have a safe hidden in your pantry. And inside it, you have 12 coins, a will, and a passport.
How did you know that? What are you? Are you a god?
Well, no more than you. You see, since I am above you, in the 3rd dimension, I can see inside things in your world.
3rd dimension? You are a crazy ghost. There's only 2. Look.
So, if I were to touch the inside of your stomach, how would I do that?
Well, you'd have to cut through my skin. Otherwise, it's impossible. Stop! Stop! No.
Ready for more?
More what?
Dimensions.
Oh,
Directions.
no. Yes, but there aren't any. More? What will happen to me? What will I become?
You'd have to become it to know.
Okay.
Excellent.
I never knew.
I think that's awesome. I love it every time I watch it. Talk about higher consciousness and trying to figure it out. You have to experience it. I never knew. You know, you have to. How do I do it? You have to be it to experience it. That's what they're saying here. And then trying to bring that back. Don't say the A word, that's above. You might say, it's been a long time, don't say the P word, that's psychic. You know, it's natural. It's just a different dimension, it's a higher dimension. And it is our journey, you know, because it's, again, raising that higher consciousness, you know, to a universal consciousness. Teilhard Chardin, who wrote several books on it, he was a Jesuit priest, but he was also a world-famous paleontologist and anthropologist that was involved in the discovery and research of the Peking man. Wrote several books, and the church wouldn't allow them to be printed until after he passed, about exactly that, is that not only is there a physical evolution that we can trace on this world, but there's a consciousness evolution going on. And that, as he put it, we are evolving our consciousness also into what he called a new sphere, which means basically that on Earth that all our minds are connected. Sound familiar from Edgar in 1910? Of course, Chardin was writing that in 1950. But also to reach a higher to that, to what he called the omega point, where we reach universal or God, cosmic consciousness, whatever term you'd like to use. But it is that development, it is that growth. I mean, it's just incredible. And it's that experience. And that's when we have to drop the words at some point and go into that experience. So how do we get to that Carnegie Hall, that Akashic record? Yes, practice, practice, practice. And it's really straightforward. That meditation, that higher ideal, that daily meditation, the rest flows with it by itself because you become that attunement to it. All right, and it's a wonderful journey. I recommend it to anyone. And guess what? It is our birthright and it is our journey. And sooner or later, you're going to go on it. That's the good thing about eternity. So, if there are any questions, if I can answer them, I think we still have a little time. I'll be happy to. I know there's a lot to take in here.